Hello and welcome to the 2020 series presented by the New York Film Academy. The 2020 series are conversations with creative visionaries about craft, creativity, and collaboration. So we're going to have 20 minutes of shop talk and then 20 minutes of responding to you guys, the global audience. So please write in your questions. We are so lucky today to have a renowned TV director who really was the instigator of major TV, especially in America, Alan J. Levi. And hello, Alan, good job. We did it.
Hi, Liz. How you doing?
We are here together. How awesome.
Finally.
I know it takes a village and takes some time. As with everything in the film industry, it takes a million years longer than you'll ever imagine things happening.
Right. Just like shooting.
So when we were starting to talk, and we didn't go into this because I wanted to, have it on in this conversation, you did like the big, like when it seemed to me looking at your repertoire of TV that you were like doing the shows that were the start of the big machinery of TV, like TV becoming big TV. So with like Magnum PI or Peter Falk and Columbo and stuff like that. So how is TV, and you've directed recently as well, how is TV from that era different than TV today, do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, the technology, it makes it quicker and easier. We're digital now. The lights are a quarter the size of what they used to be, and 25% small, 50% smaller or whatever. We're doing much more location. The old TVs were basically studio based, and creatively, I think we were shooting television back then. Bionic Woman, $6 Million Man, Magnum PI, that was television. Today, you get an hour show and it's a mini movie. It's much more complicated and much more refined than what we were doing. And the screens were smaller. Today, you've got 60, 70, 80 inch screens, and we were making television shows for screens as small as 14, 16, 18 inches. So it was, a master shot over shoulders, close-ups, and run to the next one. Today, you've got mobile units, which are incredible. You've got drones. You've got the technology has advanced us to a point where it's much more fluid and much more complicated, actually.
And do you think the storytelling itself has gotten more dramatic or richer or deeper, or has the storytelling itself changed, or is just the technicals changed?
No, I think the storytelling today is more complicated. It's more interweaved. Now, I'm not saying that some of the older shows weren't beautifully constructed and everything. But today, with the feature film type of filming and the speed at which we're moving today, we can build in a lot more. It was simpler television. Early television was simpler. Today, it's more complicated, and I think the acting is just as good, if not better, today.
And what was it like working with those sort of big stars at the time, like the Tom Sellecks and the Peter Falks and stuff like that? As a director, what was that like working with them?
Well, that was a ball. I mean, from my point of view, and I'm tainted because I started directing at 15. And I always wanted to be a director. And so when I finally got to the point where I started to directing people of note, I just had a ball. I mean, it was a dream come true. And I had a great time with them. There were very few problematic actors that I worked with that I felt, because I had such a good time. And if there was a problem, I didn't take it as something that couldn't be solved. And we solved them and went on. So every time and I worked with some really big people, the Falks, and of course, Peter was Columbo way before I knew him.
Mm.
I was involved with Tom Selleck as he became the Tom Selleck, which
Wow.
was also fun. So, you know, there were a lot of actors that I worked with who had not become famous yet. And they did so either while I was working with them on a series that was successful or afterwards.
And did you, with like, say, Peter Falk, with, you know, he's sort of renowned for being, you know, very specific. Did you, when you first worked with him, did you have to prove yourself?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
In what ways?
Well, you know, Peter didn't like anybody who tried to do anything that they weren't really good at. And so he would test you. But he never gave up on that, because many times and I say many times, I'm talking about sometimes 60 or 70% during the day, I would print take 3 because I thought it was marvelous. And by the time we got done with that take, Peter said, "Oh, I like take 23." So take 3 was okay, but not with Peter. And many times I would take him into the daily room. At that time, we were projecting dailies on big screens. And I'd say, "Peter, here's take 3 and take 23. You tell me which one was yours." And he'd look at him and he'd say, "I don't know, I just felt better." Well, that was Peter. And he was great that way.
And at that point, though, would you acquiesce and use his choice, or was it your choice to use?
You know, if it didn't make any difference, I don't. If he really was specific on something, I'd use it. You know, why not? He was Columbo, and there was very little difference between Columbo and Peter Falk. They were the same person. They really were.
Wow. So did he overrun the writers?
Oh yes, yeah. He worked with the writers from the very beginning almost. When Levinson and Link started Columbo, they actually didn't have Peter Falk in mind for it. And when he got it, you know, he was a very strong actor, and he had his opinions, but you always listened to him, because there was a small bit in what he was saying that you better listen to, because he was normally right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so he sounds like one of the people that you learned a lot from as well.
Oh, absolutely. But I learned a lot from everybody. I think a director has to continue to learn. And we, you know what, we always have our vision, and sometimes we have to say, okay, that's our vision. I've got to meld it with the actor's vision, and certainly with the producer's vision. So I think we've got to remain fluid as well.
What do you think are some of yours, you would call like your superhero strengths? Like, if someone's like, well, what you as a director, what are your things that you're bringing?
That I bring to it?
Right.
Well, you know, I try and make it a personal relationship with a director, with an actor, as much as I can, because I think that works. If you can take an actor off the set and put your arm around them and whisper something to them that's of value, I think that's one of the high points of what you're trying to do. There was an actress once, a very skilled actress. Well, I mentioned her name because she's just fantastic, Barbara Bain. And Barbara did as much television in her career as I did in my career, and she's fantastic. But one time I put my arm around her, and later she came to me and she said, "You know, you said something to me that no other director has ever said to me, and it meant so much that I just went away and thought about it for a few minutes, and you saw what happened." I said, "I did." I put my arm around her and I said, "Less is more." And that's all I said to her. And she acquiesced toward that immediately. And that's all I really wanted to say to her. And it was, I think that's what we as directors had more time in the old television than we do in the new television, because we're moving so fast today. And NCIS, I mean, in old television, we used to gear for hopefully 25 setups a day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In today's television, if we didn't hit 45 setups, we're moving slow.
Wow. But you're not changing film. You were also changing mags and,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
moving those
And we're shooting,
light.
and multiple cameras today are the thing.
Right.
First of all, you can fit cameras this size. You can fit 3 or 4 cameras this size into a room.
Right.
Or we had cameras that were this size, you didn't have room for it. If you're shooting in a bathtub, that's about it, one camera.
Did you find that, do you feel like the politics of the industry is different now than then?
I think so. At the beginning of my career in network television, we had older, seasoned people in charge.
Mm-hmm.
And the budgets were certainly important, but we were shooting with budgets that at that time were $700,000-800,000 an hour. Today we're spending 2.8, 3.2, 2.5, up to $4.5 million on some episodes. And so I think the younger crowd who are now the exec producers or the executives at the companies are more aware of the dollar.
Yeah.
Than we were there. So I think, and sometimes we're under more pressure
Then or now?
now.
Now,
Yeah.
because there's so much money that's being.
There's so much money involved, and the scripts are more complicated, and you've got to hit a certain level of expertise in putting together the show in the same amount of time that we had 25 years ago. So you've got to move quickly. And I think the relationship between the director and the DP today is even more important in television than it was when we were doing early television.
Oh, talk to me more about that. So, because I know you have a strong technical background as well. So DPs must have loved you.
Well, having been a photographer and a DP all of my life, sort of. I mean, I'm not a director of photography, professionally. In old television, I used to set the camera myself. I knew what I wanted, if a camera to move or to zoom or to dolly in or do whatever. Today, you don't have time for that. Today, you've just got to say to the DP, what do you think about something like this? And they'd go, fine. And they'd set it up at the same time that they're lighting. So I think the pacing today is a lot faster.
You have to make friends a lot quicker.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. And the funny thing is that today you've got a lot of extremely talented young directors of photography. Which in the older days in Magnum and Bionic Woman, $6 Million Man, and so on, these were the older guys who had shot motion pictures.
Right.
They came into television, and I remember one DP came on board. My regular DP was ill or had something to do one day, and so one of the older DPs came onto the set, and we rehearsed it. And so I called for the camera, and they wheeled it in. And he came to me and he said, "What are you doing with my camera?" And I said, "I was going to set it up." He says, "That's my camera. What do you want?" And I said, "Well, okay, how about this and this and this?" He'd say, "Okay, get off of there." So I got off, and I was fine. And about 5 minutes later, came over and he said, "Would you like to take a look in my camera and make sure it's okay?" So he acquiesced a little bit, and we ended up having a good time during the day. But today, the younger, and especially there were no women DPs back then.
Right.
And today you've got some unbelievably talented gals, and they're young and they learn fast and they move fast. And you can say to one of them, "Can we do 2 cameras on this?" And they'll go, "Sure. What do you want? How about 2 over shoulders?" That's cool. I'll set it up. Take a look. Boom, you're there. Bang. It's fun.
That's great. That's great. When you were talking about with females, when you're working like on the Bionic Woman, that feels like, you know, a little ahead of the curve show that really was, you know, showcasing a empowered woman as a
Yeah.
featured person.
Yeah.
And did you feel that you were making something special or different with that?
Well, we did for a number of reasons. What you just said is true. Lindsay Wagner was very aware of that as well, and so she took a great interest in the scripts and the stories and things to make sure that it hit that positive angle from the woman's point of view, and she was very good at that. And Lindsay and I, we became sister and brother together, totally. We had a short, by the time the show was into its, maybe seventh or eighth show, she and I had developed a shorthand of talking about what we both wanted. And it became just so much fun and productive.
And at that time when you were, you know, really starting to work a lot, who were directors that you admired, that you looked up to as sort of idolizing that? Was there any
in television?
In television or in films?
Well, in television, there were guys like Lamont Johnson. And I'm trying to remember some of the other guys that I watched very carefully, because they started in New York in live television and then came out here and started doing film.
Mm-hmm.
There was no way that I was going to be a John Ford in television, you know. You can't afford doing that. But there were people that I studied as I came up in the world of directing when I was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the John Fords of the world and the William Wylers of the world and so on, because they were storytellers. And they knew what they wanted. Sometimes they waited for what they wanted, which we couldn't do. John Ford used to wait until a cloud had just reached the exact point on the horizon that he wanted, and then he would shoot the scene. We didn't have that luxury. But watching what these guys did with actors, and some of them were better, you know, John Ford, John Wayne and Ford were best friends, and they had a shorthand. And I learned that. And I came out here when I graduated high school under the tutelage of Dick Powell. He was my mentor, and he was head of 4-Star at that time. And he put me, for the summer before I went back to Northwestern, he put me in a studio for 7 weeks. Each week he put me 1 week with a director, which was a funny story I'll tell later, with a director 1 week, an editor 1 week,
Oh, wow.
and 1 week. So by the time the summer was over, I had been lucky enough to have 7 mentors in different areas of the business.
That's amazing.
It was amazing. Yeah.
I mean, that's very rare, actually.
Yeah. You know, when you're a kid, I mean, it's more than amazing. It's fulfilling a dream.
100%, 100%. And was it always TV for you? Because, you know, I know you've done some of your own features. Have there been ones, was that a passion to have your voice and have your, you know, your ideas on film, as opposed to, say, being more of a midwife for other writers' ideas?
What do you mean? I'm sorry.
Like, as a filmmaker, it's your ideas, it's your script, or it's a script that you really feel strongly about having to make in the world. Whereas as a TV director, basically you're fulfilling other people's vision of what they feel strongly about making in the world. I was just wondering, did you ever gravitate, was it always TV, or did you gravitate towards making your own films and having your own signature?
Well, I may be one of few who says this, but I love television. I love the pace of television. In a feature film, you put a year or more of your life into that film. By the time from not writing the script, I am not a writer. I'm an okay script doctor, but I can't write. So I never tried to. And I like being able in a year to direct 9, 10, or 11 shows. Whether they're the same series or whether they're different series, it doesn't make any difference. I like the pace. And I really don't think I'm a feature director. I think I'm a television director. And I like that. That's fine. That moniker is okay with me.
Right, because a lot of people want to have their own stamp, let's say.
Yeah, well, I think, I think we can put our stamp on things.
In what way?
If you direct something that's in its 10th year, there's not a lot you can do with it because the actors know what they're supposed to do, and the scripts have been proven to follow a certain path. You can't do a lot with it, but you can always do something with it, actor wise or relationship wise, or bring it something that's fresh. We were in our 6th year, I think 5th or 6th year of Magnum. And I got a script from a writer, and I read it a couple of times, and I thought, this is a very unusual script. And so I had some thoughts of it, and I went to Tom Selleck and Charles Johnson, who was exec producer at that time. And I said, guys, I want you to trust me on this show, because I'm going to shoot it differently than we've ever shot a Magnum before. And would you trust me on it? And both of them said, yeah, you've done 15, 16 shows already, do it. So I did it. And yet on the 3rd day, both of them came to me and they said, what the hell are you doing? And I said, wait till it's finished. And when it got finished, it kind of altered and gave permission to other directors to bring in their own vision on some scripts that were out of the ordinary, out of the mainstream.
And so what were you doing differently than the shooting way before?
Well, there were 2 things. Number one, let's say the culprit, the bad guy. We never saw him until the very end when he was captured. So you never knew who it was. 90% of the time, you know who the culprit is, or you see him, or you become acquainted with him and you say, no, that can't be the guy. And it turns out to be the guy. So that was that part of it. The other part of it was technical. And it was that most of the scenes in the entire picture were done in one take with no coverage.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And the camera moved into close-ups and back out again. And what I tried to do was to choreograph the actors so that the camera was not moving without cause. And if an actor could move into the scene, then you didn't have to move the camera. And so I did that. And then the other thing was that I brought in a piece of music, and I forget the group, but they were a very popular group. And I brought in some outside music into the show, which finally I got permission to spend the $8,000 on that piece just as a royalty, and we brought it into the show. So it kind of changed people's view and gave other directors permission to do things that were, Magnum really didn't have a style.
Oh, interesting.
It was the four stars who propelled that series. And I wanted, this particular script was so unique that I could alter the way it was shot, and it told the story even better had we just shot it normally.
And do you have a acting background at all? What has made you so great with actors?
You do not want to see me try and act, okay? Never in the world. And I do not give readings. I gave one reading one time on a show called what the heck show? Which show was it? Father of the Bride. Not the movie for Father of the Bride, but Leon Ames was a very seasoned actor. And I was a young kid. This was the second show, and I was associate producer of the show, in charge of the set. And they rehearsed a scene, and for some reason, Leon Ames, who was a very, very fine actor, said a line that I didn't approve of personally. And so I went up to him and I said, you know, that line that you say such and such, don't you think that a reading like this? And I read that line to him and he looked at me and he said, you are telling me how to say that line. And I have never tried that sentence.
He was, I'm going to decapitate you as you stand here.
Yeah. No, I would rather impart a reason for somebody to interpret a line differently than to give them a reading of the line.
Mm-hmm.
That's not my thing.
But what do you, I guess my question is, so what has made you so agile with actors?
Simply, I think it's because I just love what I do so much. And I think that we're in the business of communication, technically. And I think we've got to take that communication down to the level of the people who are working on the set. And it's just not the actors, it's the DP, it's the operator. It's everybody on the set has to contribute. And if you see something that needs an alteration, you can go up and suggest something. And I mean, I certainly don't know everybody's business, but I can tell them what I feel about something that I'm feeling at the moment and let them interpret it and make a change in it. And I think communication between a director and an actor and the DP are the most important things on the set.
And what is your suggestion for directors to be like more masterful at their craft?
You mean a young director?
No, I mean, there's lots, or director, you know, any director, because they, as we're saying, you always can learn.
Well, you know, if I can interpret what you're saying correctly, there are so many facets to direction. There's pre-production, there's reading the script first. The first time I read a script, I just read it. And I try and visualize what I'm reading. The second time I read it through, I read it more to the fact of, okay, now what can I do with this to communicate with the viewer? But we've got pre-production, we've got scouting, we've got casting, we've got shooting, I mean, we've got editing, and we've got all the post-production work. And I think the more a director can learn enough about all of those procedures, not to be expert in each one, but to know enough to either ask questions or to make a contribution in them. When I teach young people, I say, you know, when I started out, I had to buy 16mm film. I had to rent a camera. I had to process the film. I had to have a projector, and that costs a lot of money. Today, you can go out and get a $150 video camera, and you can shoot. And there are probably 7 or 8 main editors which are available on screen of computers that every kid has, even down to an iPad. And it's to shoot and edit and become familiar with all of that process so that you can communicate as a director what your vision is, or if somebody, I remember the first time that I went into a professional editing room here with the exec producer, Harv Bennett, and there was a problem with a scene and an edit on a scene. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to make a suggestion. And I made a suggestion. And Harv turned to me and he said, are you going to argue with genius? And I said, no, not at all. And he turned to the editor and he said, well, try what this young guy said. And they did. And it was, and Harv said, oh, that's better. I, at that particular point, had not edited professionally, but I felt I knew enough to know that you could do this with a piece of film instead of this with a piece of film. And I think the more a director can learn about each facet of it, even if it's to push a dolly, or to set a light or to set a gobo, whatever it may be.
100%.
That makes any sense.
That makes total sense. And what's like, do you have one or two of those, like you always remember those oh shit moments when you're like, that I don't know what I'm going to do here, and then you came up with something?
Specifically, no, I don't think so. I've had a lot of oh shit moments, but they've worked themselves out, or I've gone to the actor or the DP, depending on where the oh shit was, and ask them for a suggestion. You know, they got, normally they come up with some kind of solution.
Well, that's what makes you a good director, is the collaboration and being with others.
Well, yeah, and if you do have a collaboration, you've always got somebody to put the blame on.
We have some great questions here. So Cycle asks, how do you tell a good actor apart from an outstanding actor?
When you don't see the acting.
Mm.
Now I know that's a very simplified version, but many times I will tell people, be yourself. Or if you have created another character that you want to play, then just be that character. Don't worry about acting it, just do it. That's the best explanation I can have for that.
When you're giving adjustments to like a Peter Falk or Tom Selleck or something, are they expecting to be like super short, or do they want to get in a conversation, do you find?
Well, it depends on what exactly what you're trying to communicate at that moment. With Barbara Bain, the less is more is all she needed on that.
Right.
Sometimes I will go up and ask a question of the actor as to why they're doing something, and then that takes a discussion. And many times during that discussion, they'll figure out that they're making too much out of nothing. And sometimes they find their own solution. I find it's really good from my point of view anyway. And it takes a bit of psychology, I guess, but many times I try and ask the question so that the actor can, by the time we're done with the suggestion, thinks that the solution has been his, not mine. Even if I've tried to lead to that solution, if they finally go, wait a minute, what if I such and such, and I'll go, that's great. Okay, they've solved it, and that's what I wanted in the first place.
That's great, with some ownership. And I think you called to it by saying why, asking why. You know, why are you doing that, or what's the reasoning behind that? I think that's great.
No, yeah.
Throw it more on that you also don't have to be the Einstein to come up with every single answer.
Yeah, but I don't think a director should tell people what to do. I think they should make a suggestion as to what could be done, or try and get them to solve it themselves so that it's satisfactory to both of you. Yeah. Sometimes it can take a moment, and sometimes it can't.
100%. Michael asks, how do you so easily let go of artistic control? I guess that is the question.
What says this? Say that again.
How do you so easily let go of artistic control?
Why must we do that? Is my question back at it. I mean, we're the director. We've got to maintain artistic control in collaboration with other people who want to maintain their control. I think it reflects back to what I was talking about a minute ago. If you ask an actor why they're doing something, if they can come up with a good answer, that is satisfactory to you and to them, then you haven't lost any control. Maybe you just understood it better. But by asking them that, if they come up with a solution, or if you can suggest a solution, then you haven't lost your control of it.
Right. You're guiding.
Yeah, exactly.
And so,
A good question, Michael. A good question. I've
and
lost
so,
control of this interview.
what? What, Alan? I just interrupted you. What type of, I know you're going to be starting to, you were saying you're looking for, Alan's looking for some scripts for a short film out there, audience. What type of things interest you now, and what type of storytelling are you interested in being involved in?
I'd rather turn that around and say what I'm not interested in. Because the horror stories, the stories that make you cringe, I think I'm interested, I think, in more in the ones that have some value to them. The short that I made, the 17-minute short that I made, was a story about a young woman who, single woman, who loses her 6-year-old child to cancer. And she goes to bed and recoils from everybody in the world, her best friends and everything else. And it's a story about how her two best friends get her back on her feet and back into living again, and expecting that tomorrow is going to be better than today, and to look forward to that. So that has some meaning to it. I can make the explanation this way. For years, having done The Invisible Man, Gemini Man, Bionic Woman, Hulk, $6 Million Man. Now, those were all action pictures.
Right.
And then I directed Scruples, which was a 6-hour miniseries. And then my agent got a call. I went to Warner Brothers to try and sell me on another show. And they said, Alan Levy's an action director. And they said, well, wait a minute, he just did Scruples. So, action films at this particular point don't interest me at all.
Love stories?
If it's a good love story, you better believe it. I'm living one, so that's fine.
Oh, that's very sweet. That's very sweet. And then one other great question. Anne asked, what do you expect from actors on a set?
Well, hopefully by the time you get to the set, you've had some discussion, you've had some time with the actors. And I expect them to, number one, be professional. I don't know how many actors I have had on set who think that they've read the script enough that they know what the character is, and have looked at the dialogue enough that they'll get by. That doesn't work for me at all. I lose a little patience then, and then I become a little bit more, excuse the word, directorial, but I mean that in a good sense. I remember once I was shooting Dr. Quinn, and I had a gal on there who could not remember a line at all. And I didn't say anything to her. We just stumbled through it. But then the star of the show went up to her and said, how dare you come onto this set not knowing every word, when all of us are here every day with 10 times more lines than you have every day, and we don't cost the time that you have cost us. She said, now go over in the corner and read your damn script.
She said it all for you.
She did. Yeah. Jane Seymour was very outspoken and right on the thing. And I've had to many times finally resort to making cue cards.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the most thing. And I think to expand that just for a second, I expect the actor to bring something to it which is more than what is written on the page.
And what do you mean by that?
It can be a look, it can be an attitude, it can be a how they say a sentence, which is different than what you would normally think, but yet it makes a point more than just the sentence is meant to do. I like them to bring ideas to the set, not be solidified in that.
Mm-hmm.
We all have to be malleable enough to make changes, but we make changes together. I remember, I'll tell a story on my darling wife, who I've directed in 17 movies or 17 shows. We were doing a Bill Cosby mystery 2-hour. And I suggested to her that about now, just wander over to the window and just kind of look out the window. And then you can come back in. And she said, I don't want to do that. And I said, why not? And she said, well, it feels like it doesn't feel right.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, my darling, you were supposed to look out that window and see the perpetrator across the way. And she said, well, then I'll walk over toward the window. So she came in with one idea, but there was a good reason to change it. And she did.
Right. And so you gave her a great reason. Alan, this has been wonderful. And we are now at time.
Oh, well, thank you very much for inviting me. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the questions from you, from Ann, from Michael, from everybody who wrote in. Thank you so much.
And where, if people want to look at your work, or how can they possibly email you if possible, or reach out? They have questions.
You certainly email me. My email.
We can go to your website. What's your website? What is your website? My
website is Alan, ALAN, initial J, Levi, LEVI, all one word, alanjlevy.com. Okay, great. Well, this has been such an excellent classroom and really wonderful to speak to you. Liz, it went by very, very quickly. And Charlie, wherever you are, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Thanks, Charlie, for listening that. And it was so great having you. And thank you, New York Film Academy, for presenting the 2020 series. Be good, be safe, be well. You too. Bye. Bye.